In the 6th round of the Sinquefield Cup, we saw how Vishy Anand narrowly failed to defeat Anish Giri. How would he react going for the next round, round 7? He had the black pieces this time against Ding Liren. Now, both these players sharing the lead in the tournament, so this was a very important encounter. So Ding with the white pieces, and of course he's on fantastic form at the moment. So this is a severe test for both players. Ding likes to play this Catalan variation with white. Very, very experienced indeed. And Anand plays this line with the check and dropping the bishop back to e7. Very experienced in this. And Ding is also very experienced in this line with both colours actually. Personally, I like this system very much with black. It's very solid, but it also offers dynamic chances for black actually. If you're interested in learning more about this, I would warmly recommend my PowerPlay DVD, where there's over 5 hours of instruction in this very line. You can buy that from the ChessBase online shop. Okay, advertisement over. Now Ding here played a4. I have to say I don't particularly like a4, although it's quite a trendy move at the moment among some of the top players. For example, Boris Gelfand likes playing this. I mean, normal moves here are rook d1, bishop f4, rook c1 as well, but this is a little bit strange to my eyes, because after a5, well, black claims this b4 square. And also the knight on a3 sometimes looks a bit odd here. Nevertheless, there are decent ways for white to play this, and anyway, that's what's on the board. Now, over the next few moves, knight e4 is possible. That's another way of playing this position, but Vishy plays bishop d6. Now it seems strange to move this bishop again, but what he's doing is controlling the e5 square, and he's ready to break out with e5. Knight e1, so this knight wants to come around to d3 to cover the b4 square. Well, it's been weakened, so the knight needs to come around to cover it, I guess. And now queen e7 has been played a few times before. If you put this position into your computer, then the computer's like rook e8, and that is the move that Vishy played. I have no doubt that he was still in his opening preparation. I mean, it's very subtle. The difference between queen e7 and rook e8, both moves seem quite decent to me. And there we go, he's breaking out with this move e5. And if white wants to kind of calm things down a bit here, then it's possible just to exchange on e5, for example here, and then exchange on d5 and chop some pieces off. And I would assess this position as roughly level. I think both sides are okay here, knight c4 or maybe e4, but the knight comes into b4. But Ding played more ambitiously, taking on d5. So in this way, it does mean he's about to give his knight square on b5. But before recapturing, Vishy flicks in e4. And then recaptures on d5. And knight b5, that knight finds a good square, and the bishop drops back to b8. You want to preserve that dark square bishop. So now the nature of the position has changed with the changed pawn structure, basically. So if we look at the structure determines where the pieces should go and determines middle game plans. So we can see that black has these pawns in the middle, and it's a little bit like a reversed French position. In fact, it reminds me a little bit of Vishy's game against Giri, where he also had a kind of French position with white. Okay, this is a little bit different because Ding has this fianchetto on the king side. Now, the bishop isn't very well placed here. It's just hitting against the pawn on e4. And really the only way to bring that bishop into play is at some moment, not straight away, that would be very foolish to allow e3, but at some moment to play f3 to break down black's centre. But, you know, that is fraught with danger actually, because that can also weaken white's king. So all in all, I think this is actually quite a good setup for black, but it all depends whether white can find counterplay on the c file. So let's take a look. Rook c1. But Vichy finds an excellent move here. Now, you can see that knight c7 is a threat here. If white can get this in and exchange pieces, then, you know, occupy c7, then white is doing extremely well. Rook a6 is an excellent move, and that means that knight c7 can be met by rook c6. And anyway, rook c6 coming, and that just blocks white's play on the c file. And if black can preserve this really nice pawn centre, then he's doing very well here. You know, nice space advantage. I mean, I think actually in this position maybe f3 is necessary, but I like black's position here anyway. But Ding played bishop h3, which tactically is a mistake. There are problems with this move. Let's see why. So rook c6, attacking the queen. The queen moves, and then knight b6, and this causes a bit of a crisis in white's position. So you can see that black is hitting this knight, and that knight protects the bishop here. And if bishop c8, well, in fact, black has a couple of good moves here. It's possible just to play queen takes, and, well, now knight c4 is a threat, and if knight a3, then you can just take here and queen h3, and black has a very strong attack. And after bishop c8, there's another good move, and that's knight c4, and well, this also works out very nicely for black. So after this move, knight b6, Ding took on a5, but he's in big trouble here. Bishop h3 was basically just a mistake. And Vichy took on h3 and played queen c8, which attacks this rook and attacks the knight. And this is just tremendous. If rook takes, then the pawn threatens the knight, the queen threatens the knight. If king up, then knight c4, and white is losing a piece because the bishop is attacked and the knight is also attacked here. Lots of tactics going on here. I'm kind of slightly glossing over this. There are lots of tricky side variations, but you know, this is the essential point, that Ding is losing material here. So anyway, king g2 played, and now Vichy simply took the rook, which is an excellent move. Knight c4 is also very strong. It's possible to play like this and play for the attack with knight g4 with potential idea of rook h6. Extremely dangerous. But who could resist taking a rook? So after this little exchange, let's just take stock of the position. Anand has won an exchange, so he has a rook against knight and pawn. And this just should be a pretty regular win for black. There are no huge complications in the position. I think particularly when the rooks have been exchanged, so this rook is on its own. If this rook gets into the game, gets into white's position, then black is just going to be winning. So there are basically two ways you can go about heading for the victory here. You can play quite technically, or you can continue going for the attack. Now I just wonder whether Vichy was influenced by his game against Giri from round 6, the previous round, where quite early in that middle game he spurned the chance simply to attack Giri's king, if you recall, with knight d4 and queen g4. Do check out that video if you haven't seen it, because I think it has a bearing on this game. But basically Vichy could have gone for a very straightforward attack, but instead played something quieter, which also gave him a big advantage, but he didn't quite clinch the game in the end. So I wonder whether Vichy had it in his head that instead of playing something technical, he should be going for the attack, because that was his mistake in the previous round. So here, what's the technical way to play? Well, queen c4. This is a good move, a solid move. No particular complications. Now, if that queen goes back, that is miserable. The position just gets worse. So white really has to take this. Now we've got an endgame where white has 0 chances of winning. It's a technical win. After this knight hits d5, yes, this knight can come back to challenge here, or maybe e3 and this knight comes to e2. White can try and get some kind of blockade, but really black has very, very good winning chances there. So that's one way to go. But Vichy, after over 15 minutes thought, played e3. He went for the attack. This is actually very strong, but if you go for this, then you have to be absolutely certain that your attack is breaking through. So naturally white has to keep the position closed with f3. And now h5. So you can see that by playing e3, this has weakened this g3 point. And with black's pieces so active, this does look very natural as well. And here bishop a5 played knight c3, possibly a better move, but still white in trouble here. h4, good move, softening this, and perhaps ready to take and play knight h5. So ding took. It's very hard to find a defense at this point, and here is where Vichy went wrong. In fact, what he's done so far is absolutely spot on. But here he could clinch the game by playing knight e4. Here he brought the queen back. And I think he was looking to move the knight and get into the attack this way. But knight e4 is really clear cut. So the knight wants to come into d2. And then queen f1 and so on. Well, that would be mate straight away if allowed. So knight e4. Well, the crucial question is what happens if this is taken? Well, this allows the rook to join the attack very quickly. And there is just no good defense here. You can see that white's king is opened and black's piece is massing for the attack against the king. White's queen way across the other side of the board in Siberia, and these pieces as well. Not a pretty sight. So it's this lone knight trying to protect the king, and it's pretty ugly. So let's see. For example, well, first things first, what about queen takes? Can the queen get back? In fact, this simply loses to rook g4 and queen h1. So that's an important variation. The queen cannot rejoin the defense. Or join the defense, I should say, not rejoin. Okay, so what about bringing the knight back to attack the rook? Well, this is a very nice variation and ends in one of my favourite kinds of checkmating patterns, actually. Watch this. Queen here, So that obviously checks the king, threatens the knight, and if king takes rook, here we go, check, king f5 and queen g6. That's the pattern that I really like, where the king is caught in this crossfire of queen and bishop. A beautiful checkmate. There are other variations, but listen, that's the most beautiful one. So basically in this position, white is lost. The king is just falling prey to a deadly attack here. And yes, what happens if white tries to hang on instead of taking knight? Queen takes knight d2. This is really nasty with the threat of queen f1, and if that's taken, then that doesn't help matters. I have a feeling that if Vichy had considered knight e4 in any kind of depth, he would have played it, but he obviously didn't consider it, and he came back with the queen. But after bishop e1, suddenly this bishop bounces back and manages to plug a few gaps in the defense. Now, probably the best move is to come back with the queen here, actually, but knight h5 played by Vichy. And after this, it is really not simple for black. Black is still the exchange up, but you know, the fact that he's given a pawn here is difficult. And probably the best move again is to exchange and bring the queen to c1. But it's very hard to admit your mistake and come back like this. And after thinking for over 26 minutes, Vichy decided, right, I want a technical position. He could have played this in a much superior version, as we saw a few moves ago, without giving up this pawn. So he's basically got caught between two ideas, but he goes back to the technical line, and in fact white should be okay here. Ding played knight g5. There's a very strange move here, which is a real computer suggestion. It's not a human move. This looks so ugly, f4, to block in the bishop. But actually, what it does is make room for the king, and it actually blocks out black's bishop too. And this bishop can still come back into the game. And it's quite possible that white is going to win that pawn on e3. It's a strange idea, but probably quite a good one. But instead, Ding played knight g5, and now Vichy finds his feet again. It's a pity for black that it's necessary to exchange the bishop here, but, well, the bishop couldn't do much anyway, because it straightens out white's pawns. But now at least Vichy is back into technical mode, and he's pretty comfortable with this. I think one could spend many hours studying this endgame and still not determine whether it's actually a definite win for black or whether it's a draw. But the way both players play here is pretty logical. Ding is trying to exchange pawns, and Vichy is trying to find time to push that b pawn. So obviously the more pawns are exchanged, the closer Ding gets to a draw, but Vichy has a chance with that outside b pawn. Now I'm going to get to a critical moment here. We're at move 44, and you know, both players running a little bit short on time, but still, here's the crunch moment. Now, Vichy played here knight a4, which looks very logical to bring the knight in to support the pawn and rook. There is a study-like way to win this position, I think. So instead of knight a4, b3. So pawn edging closer. So rook, I think rook b1 and b2 is already probably a threat here. So knight d2 looks pretty good, stopping rook b1, also looking at the pawn on b3. And now there is an absolutely stunning idea, and I think this kind of idea is almost impossible to spot in an actual game. f5. Very strange move. Beautiful move, actually. This puts white into a kind of Zugzwang. So that means that whatever move white makes, it compromises his position. For example, let's try knight c4. Well, then we exchange and play rook a2, and once again this is a kind of Zugzwang position. However white moves, he's in trouble. So here's one very nice move. If knight d2, then this obviously wins the knight. Let me see, if the knight moves somewhere else, again rook a1 check and b2. If the king moves here, then the pawn drops, but actually rook c2 wins the knight. If the pawn advances, then this allows the rook to sweep round to this side of the board and pick up pawns. So I think black is winning there. So what else we got? What about king c1? Now knight a4 is very strong. Again, this is a Zugzwang position, actually. So if knight d5, then we've got a fantastically powerful check. And it's I think there's more than one way to win this now. But this is very nice because you can see that white's king is cut off and b2 is just winning. So that's very clean. Or knight c4. Then check and knight c3 and b2. So king c1 actually puts the king in a position where it's liable to be checked. Okay, what else we got? Okay, what about f4? Just waiting. Well, black can wait as well, actually. And that should be good. And finally, what about knight takes pawn? Well, that allows black's knight into this superb square where it takes away the e3 square, but also looks at playing knight c3 check, and that is really too powerful for white to deal with. So f5, what a clever idea, really subtle. But instead Vichy played knight a4, which feels so natural to move the knight in. But actually after this move, these knights cover the c3 square. And now knight d2, and this rook is kind of dominated by the knights. You can see here, it can't really move very well. If it moves to the side, then knight takes pawn. e4, and now Ding is just exchanging pawns. Because he knows actually that, well, white has basically stopped black on the queen side. And another excellent move, controlling. You can see this rook is completely dominated by the knights now. All those squares protected. And now there's nothing to do for black. The king has to hang back, and the knight has switched round to attack this pawn here. I mean, yeah, Vichy has to be even a little bit careful here if these pawns roll forward any further. But okay, now he realizes he just switches into draw mode, and so we're just liquidating to a draw. But as I say, I think that last win in this endgame was incredibly difficult, and here a draw. So I don't blame Vichy for that. But it's this moment earlier on where somehow there was this indecision. He was caught in two minds. I think that's the moment when he'll be really unhappy after the game, where he wasn't more decisive. So there we go. In fact, all games were drawn again in round 7 of the Sinquefield Cup. So that still means that Anand and Ding and Caruana share the lead with 4 rounds to go. Thanks for watching.